Hey, this is Doug, and you're listening to Homestead Grown, or Doug from Homestead Grown. You're listening to the Homestead Grown live show on radio.homesteadgrown.org. And welcome to the Friday podcast, live cast. Glad you're all here. Maria, are you connected and in?
I am in. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Good. So tonight we are going to talk about a few things, but one of them is Andrew Torba, the founder of Gab, made a post, I think yesterday, that I wanted to read and just chat briefly about and see what your thoughts are. But then we're also going to focus more on this term that I learned in an Appleseed shoot some years ago, where they said slow is fast and fast is slow. So we're going to talk about that and how that relates to not just homestead grown, but more specifically to the grow model food system. And then if you stick with us to the end, we'll do a community update, and we'll welcome some new folks to the community, a couple new members joined since I think last time we met. So, okay. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get kicked off with a post. Again, Andrew Torba is the founder of Gab. And so if you aren't coming to us from Gab, then you may have preconceived idea of what Gab is and have a negative connotation. And it's really unfair because Gab is really all about free speech. And if it's illegal, then you're not going to thrive on Gab. But if it isn't illegal and it's just rude, then you're free to say what you want to say. I'm also free to not listen to you, right? That's what free speech is all about. I don't have to listen to you, but I shouldn't. Your voice shouldn't be stifled or not allowed just because I don't like what you have to say. Now, if you cross the border or the line and you go into something illegal, then that's a different issue. But anyway, so enough for Gab. I'll probably defend Gab every time I mention Gab, and the reason I do so is because it kind of saddens me to think that people are afraid of free speech, and you shouldn't be afraid of free speech. Just know that you don't have to hang out with jerks, right? You're driving on the highway every day with people, some of whom are complete jerks. It doesn't mean you have to hang out with them, but you do share the road with them, and that's kind of the same way with Gab. But anyway, so here's Torba's post, and then Maria, I'd like to get your thoughts, and then if anyone else out there that's listening caught this and you have any comments, feel free to chime in. Love to hear what your thoughts are. But here's what he said. He says, and this is a full quote, I'm bored with politics. I'm not wasting my time, energy, and focus on a rigged Talmudic system with a bunch of blackmailed degenerates who represent us. The country is going to balkanize and Judeo-American empire will fall. It's not a matter of if, but when. I'm becoming a very patient man. My focus for 2023 and beyond is going to be on preparing for what comes next. Building the parallel economy is the most important thing I can do, not being distracted with the donor class dog and pony show that is American politics. Spend more time building up your family instead of being outraged over what the clowns in DC are doing today. We can't control what they are doing. We can't even vote them out because they have that rigged too. What we can control is our own families, churches, and local communities. My content theme for 2023 is going to be producing, promoting, and elevating people and businesses who are focused on providing resources, information for homesteading, homeschooling, and homemaking. I'm working towards building a parallel, largely digital Christian nation that operates inside of the Talmudic one until it inevitably falls and we can fill the power vacuum. Anything else is a waste of time, energy, and resources, end quote. So he said a whole lot there. Maria, any initial thoughts?
I don't know. I think over the last several years, it's been interesting to watch the transition from really what seemed to be the population being really pretty, I don't want to say anti unschooling, but it was definitely like this tiny little niche that, they understood each other, but then, um, I'm glad that there's people that want to do that, but I could never do that. That's that. And it's been interesting over the, since COVID, really, how many families and people and companies and businesses have really changed their appreciation of homeschooling and homesteading and gardening. And um, so, I mean, I don't know. It just um, seems like that's the direction that a lot of things are going, which is a good thing.
Yeah, the pieces that caught me. Obviously, he points out or specifically calls out homesteading, homeschooling, and homemaking, which is interesting. But the first part for me is saying that I'm bored with politics, and so this show isn't intended to be political, but it's kind of the same thing that you do find yourself in a position sometimes where I think, well, what can I do? What can I do? We need to do something. We can all kind of, there's a collective feeling that things are starting to slip away, and it's that desire to control and say, what can I do? And the truth of the matter is what we can do is what we do, right? So in the case of with our, at least three of our kids, we homeschool, right? One's in a private school and one's in the public school for a different reason, but um, and the that's something we can do. We're kind of removing ourselves from those institutions that have the ability to hold sway or influence over how our kids look at things. Another thing is, and this is where I'm going to go directly to the grow model food system that we're developing, is another one of those where extract yourself from the institutions that can control or hold sway over you. If the grocery store is closed tomorrow, what would you do? Um, and it isn't a it isn't just some fanciful, scary idea. It's a real potential, and we see these things happen throughout the world. So the reason I thought that this post was so interesting is, not that Torba said it, because he's pretty bold, and if you read uh, Christian nationalism, this wouldn't surprise you at all. But it just kind of reminds me that we're not alone. And the idea here is, and especially with the grow model food system, and what we're going to talk about in the next step here is, this isn't really a quick rush and go do this. Regardless of where we are, and if everything just kind of went full circle or went 180 degrees back to where this is um, a Christian First Nation, and uh, uh, the some of the things that just the craziness in our society. If that kind of went to back to the background, you'd still want to focus on being able to provide for your own family. So I think that aside from the politics of things, there are a few core things that we can do to be good Americans. It doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on, right? I mean, there are good people on both sides of the aisle and everywhere in between, that at the end of the day, we should be good citizens. And good citizens are those who are responsible, who can take care of themselves and the neighbors who can't take care of themselves, and who are the folks that actually make the local institutions function. But when you start to centralize power and centralize those institutions, that's when things become that slippery slope, if you will. So
Hey, I've
that's
got
my
a
thought.
question that we didn't chat about, but are you
Yeah,
open to me just kind of throwing a
yeah,
off
yeah.
the cuff? Okay. So you said taking care of the neighbors who can't take care of themselves or can't help themselves. What is your thought on neighbors that could help themselves, but they just know that you'll take care of them? At what point do you, um, you know, say, well, listen, if you're not going to put forth any effort, we're going to, you know, you know what I mean? Am I
Yeah,
making
I do.
sense?
Yeah, no, I get it. My thinking on that is, um, it depends on the individual, depends on the relationship, but I don't believe I'm called to take care of someone who could take care of themselves. Now, if they don't see the severity of the situation, or they don't realize that, if they're just kind of in the slumber where everything as we've always known it will always be as it has been forever and time to, and they just truly believe that, then I probably have a little more sympathy. But if they understand that it really is their responsibility to be prepared for themselves and their family, and they choose not to, anticipating that someone else is going to take care of them, that's a bit different. I think the
What if they're
Bible actually,
willing to pay the money?
yeah.
Do you
Well,
care if,
money's fine. In fact, with the grow model food system, we talk about hyper local economies. So I think money or barter is perfectly fine.
oh,
I wouldn't rely forever on necessarily just money as it is today, or the U.S. dollar as it is today. But well, sure. I mean, it's a
yeah,
you could buy your way. You could buy your way to a certain extent.
you would be the grocery store.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. In fact, that's part of the economy, right? So they might be. It's the what is it? The baker, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. So everyone's got a job. Maybe their thing is fixing cars,
Yeah.
not necessarily producing food. So, but now if the idea is that I just want for free, and I don't want to have to work for anything, that's a different story. If you're capable of working,
Yeah.
yeah,
All right. Sorry, didn't you sort of made a comment and I latched onto it. So I
yeah.
didn't mean to distract you from
No, no, no. That's
okay.
great. Okay, so let's move into really the heart of the discussion today is this saying that I heard at an Appleseed shoot. First, let me explain what an Appleseed shoot is. Appleseed is a organization that teaches the history of April 19th, 1775, right? And this is the shot heard around the world story of Lexington and Concord, and how the American Revolution got started. And they do this in the backdrop of an adult and a youth uh, distance shooting training. So they're encouraged to bring a Ruger 1022 or some other uh, 22 caliber rifle. You can bring an AR, you can bring an M1. I've seen all sorts of rifles brought to these things, but you can bring different calibers. But the idea is you're going to come and you're going to learn to shoot distance. The goal is at the end of the day, or the end of the 2 days, you can shoot a target at 500 yards. But as they're teaching you range safety, gun safety, and the art of distance shooting, it's quite fun. But as they're doing that, you'll take breaks from the actual shooting, and they'll tell a little piece of the story of 1775. So you get this neat history lesson. But anyway, at that, one of the things they teach you is slow is fast and fast is slow. And especially in the context of shooting, um, unless you have a lot of experience, you're getting ready to pull a trigger that has gunpowder and an explosive, and the human body um, and mind are prepared for that, right? So when you go to pull that trigger or squeeze that trigger, there's adrenaline rushing, and sometimes you get to start pulling that trigger a little too fast. And so the idea here is to slow yourself down, because the slower you can go, the more accurate you'll be. And the more accurate you are, the faster you are at whatever the task is for the target. But if you just start squeezing off rounds, you're going to have to fire a whole lot more to meet your objective, because you're going to be all over the place. Hopefully that makes sense. So how does that relate to the grow model food system? Well, there's so much to do as you start thinking about it. As I start kind of building out all the templates, and I started this a couple years ago, and I've changed the process slightly, so I've had to rebuild some templates. But as I'm working through these models and these templates, I'm realizing there's just so much to do in order to do this properly, and it's worth taking the time, because once you get it and you kind of build that muscle memory, then you can pick up the pace a little bit. But at first, you've got to go slow in order to get fast, right? And then um, you'll find success much faster. But if you just jump in and try to do everything, like I think I'm guilty of many times, then the overwhelm sets in, and you can't get to that first step. There's other sayings like the how do you eat an elephant? The first bite, or you take the first bite, and the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. It's that same concept. That go ahead and slow down and make sure that you're making forward progress is more important than getting done, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Maria? Am I
It
making sense?
does. It does, because
Okay.
for, like you said, if you're trying to do too much too fast, you can get overwhelmed and freeze. But it's also important to take the first step and not hesitate until you have all your ducks in a row, because you'll never have all your ducks in a row and you'll never get
Never.
started.
Amen.
So,
Perfect. It's a good segue. Because actually, my little bullet points here are, the best time to start preparing was 10 years ago, but the next best time is now. That's another one of those sayings. But if your goal really is just shorten midterm preparedness, then you can buy your way into that. That's something you can just throw cash at it, and you can get storable foods, and you can have a stash of food for short term and midterm preparedness. But if you're looking for greater self sufficiency, you can't buy that. You have to think it, you have to do it, you have to learn from it, and you have to do it again. And anyone can do it, but you have to get started. And so I think what I want to do is, not assuming that everyone who listens to this has heard this same spiel before, and repetition is a good thing, but a quick overview of just the first module of the Grow Model food system is um, you've got a food journal. We're going to talk about that for a second. You've got a menu plan. You've got ingredient mining. You've got an ingredient catalog. You've got a source fork, and you've got calendar and scheduling. And that's before we plant a single seed or feed a single animal, right? So there's a lot of planning that goes into it. And that planning will pay off in the end. If you wait until you have all of the animals and all of you're never going to get anywhere. Um, you've got to start with a plan and make forward progress. So, what does the food journal do for you? Well, the food journal is, and by the way, I'm working on the official course materials, if you will, and that course will be available on community.homesteadgrown.org. So if you are one of the first 100 members, then everything on that site as long as you participate, uh, is free. And so with this course, but you don't have to wait for the course to get started. So I'm kind of outlining, here's basically the big themes of the course, and then we're going to get into detail. And I think where the course will best serve people is we'll have cohorts of folks going through the course at the same time, so you'll have support, and you'll have accountability, and you'll have encouragement with people who are in the same step that you may be in. But anyway, so the first one is the food journal. What we do here is we capture what is it that we are actually eating today. Not what do we want to eat today, not what we should eat today, but what are we actually eating today. And if what we find is we're eating a lot of exotic foods from around the world, of foods that you couldn't raise or grow at your location, then it's going to take you a little longer to transition. Again, the slow is fast and fast is slow. If you quickly try to transition and say, I'm going to switch from all I eat out, my whole family eats out 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, to we're going to grow everything and raise everything and make everything at home, it's not going to happen. It's a dream. It's not going to happen. So your transition time will take longer, but that's okay. We want to schedule that transition, and we want to factor that transition in so that we have a greater opportunity for success. This isn't going to be a rush and get it all done, and by next year you're self-sufficient. It's going to take years, but you've got to get started, right? And if in the meantime you feel what's driving you here is some insecurity about food, then go ahead and go the money route and purchase some storable foods so that you have that insurance policy. And all the while, though, don't stop once you get the insurance policy. Don't stop with making progress and momentum in the grow model food system, because at the end, then you'll have true long-term preparedness uh, and self-sufficiency, or greater self-sufficiency. Okay, so the first thing is the food journal. And the food journal, we do that for 30 days or so, whatever. You kind of know what your patterns are. And once you see that pattern unfold, if you only needed 2 weeks, then only do it for 2 weeks. But if you need 60 days because you have such a varied menu, then take 60 days. Whatever you need in order for you to get a real good handle on, here's what we actually eat today. You want to do that. Okay, so why do we do that? Well, we do that because then the next step is we're going to menu plan. We're going to take out of that, and we're going to say, okay, what can we what comes as close to whole food that we can grow, raise, or source very close to home. Because remember, a component of this program isn't just growing it yourself, but what does your neighbor, or what can your neighbor grow, or what does the small farmer grow that follows the practices that you like? What do they grow or raise that that comes close to what you eat today? And start looking for those recipes. And then you're going to try those recipes. And you're going to try those recipes, and you're going to get the feedback from everyone that would consume that food. If you like it, that's great. But if you're the only one that likes it, not so good. Now, if we're in a total grid down, end of the world scenario, people will eat almost anything. So then you're not worrying about that. But again, that's not what this is. This is really about long-term preparedness and the ability for us to extract ourselves from the institutions that could hold sway over us, i.e., the ability to control what we eat, and when we eat, and if we eat. One of the things I like to say, I've been posting in a number of posts that I do, is it's much more difficult, or it's easier to shut down some really large mega farms than it is to shut down 1,000, 100,000, or 1,000,000, or 1 billion individual growers, right? So this is really about the long term. It's not about the short term. It's not necessarily about preparedness. It's really about a way of life. It's about a mindset. So those recipes that you are landing on are things that the whole family will eat on a normal day. So you need to make sure that they are palatable, not just for you, but for others in the family. And Maria, I would imagine you might want to chime in at this point and say, yeah, but the kids, it's,
I was going to say
what
what
does your cookbook say?
I made a cookbook or a binder that is for my recipes. And the cover says recipes that my family loves. And then I think I have like a subheading that says my kids rarely cry when I serve these, because I can tell you, and I'm not exaggerating when I say chicken pot pie. Oh my gosh. The 14-year-old loves it. The 12-year-old loves it. My 9-year-old accuses me of trying to kill him whenever I serve that. Literally, I mean, Doug can attest to the fact, like, he cries and he tantrums, and he has literally accused me of trying to kill him. And, and then sometimes, the other kids, it's hit or miss. Like, sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. But I have yet to find a recipe or a meal that every everybody loves, except pizza. Pizza seems to be about the only one that most people don't get too upset about. Although my 9-year-old, he's the hit or miss, even with pizza. But
Yeah. So
so,
so the point I think there is, right, is you're not we all know this. If we have kids, we already know this, but they're not, and not everyone's going to like everything. But you want to filter it past to make sure that uh, you're not the only one, or that mom and dad aren't the only ones that like the meal. But the expecting that some of the kids are going to push back, and we all can judge when that's legitimate, when it's not. Um, okay, so there we have our the menu plan has been tested. So we know that here's a meal that we know that the family likes, and it is of it's whole foods. What I mean by whole foods, and maybe this is the actual definition, I don't know, but it really is. I don't need a bunch of uh, the actual ingredients in the thing is I can pronounce them. Hi, Toby. Um, so the ingredients in the thing I can actually pronounce, and there are maybe 5 in a recipe. So it's not like I need 15 or 20 different things, all with chemical names and whatnot. So to pronounce. So that's what I mean by whole foods. So chicken, potatoes, corn, those are whole foods. Okay. Okay. So once we identify what those things are, now what we're going to do is we're going to do ingredient mining. And what I mean by ingredient mining is we're going to look at our recipe. Maybe we got it from a book. Maybe we got it from a friend. Maybe we got it from community.homesteadgrown.org, from someone else who's already kind of worked their way through this. And so we're sifting through, hey, we like chicken dishes, and we find a chicken dish uh, recipe. And so then we're going to look at, okay, what's in the chicken dish recipe? And we're going to do the ingredient mining, and we're going to see that it's got chicken, obviously, or let's say chicken legs, and it's got I don't know, parsley, and it's got oregano, whatever. And we're going to say, hey, uh, can we grow chicken, parsley, and oregano? Or maybe our neighbor has chicken, so we're going to do chicken. We're not ready. We live in a suburban area. We don't have room for chicken. We're not allowed to have chickens, so we will outsource that to someone local, hyper local, and so we'll purchase our chicken in, but we can grow the herbs ourselves. So there we go. We've got one recipe for a dinner. And then maybe you have your sides, and we'll do the same thing. We're going to look at, so maybe the sides are corn and mashed potatoes. Again, I'm just making this up. And so then you're going to say, okay, well, do I want to source that, or can I grow that myself? Right. So that's the idea of the menu plan. At the end of the day, the menu plan is going to say, on this day or in this season, it gets a little more detailed than just selecting uh, the the recipes, but we're also looking at when those recipes are most in season, because if they're in season, then we can get them local, we can get them, or we can raise them ourselves. But so we're going to try to lay out what is in season, and we're going to pick those things that match up as best we can. And then we're going to mine for the ingredients of those things, and then we're going to create a catalog of ingredients. At the end of the day, again, if everything were perfect and we were 100% sourcing ourselves, or hyperlocal sourcing, or growing it and raising it ourselves, we have to have every ingredient that we would need for all of our meals for the entire year. That sounds like a very daunting task, but if you take it one bite at a time, it isn't really that difficult, because you can start with a single meal. In fact, you can start with a single entree of a meal and then scale. And that's the power of scaling. So I'm long-winded here, and I don't want to bore people to death, but hopefully I'm getting across the idea that, you're food journaling to find out what you do eat, then you're menu planning to figure out how you can transition from what you do eat into what you can raise, grow, and locally source that fits your palate, or you start to transition the palate. You're going to ingredient mine the menu items to create a catalog of ingredients, so that we can have a list that says, this is when these are in season, this is when we would consume them, this is when we will start them, this is when we will harvest them, or this is an outsourced or hyper local sourced. ingredient, and this is our agreement with that hyper local sourced grower. And so you'll have all of that in a nice document that helps get the plan off the ground. And the next thing is the source fork. We talked a little bit about this when we talk about hyperlocal sourcing. It is identifying what in our ingredient catalog are we raising or growing, what are we going to hyperlocal source, and then the reality is, what do we need to get from someplace else? Because maybe we're not ready yet to transition to all whole food. Maybe we're still purchasing pre-made things. So tonight, I'll give you an example. We went to the grocery store because tomorrow we're going to celebrate New Year's, and what we do is we make a bunch of terrible for you fried foods that are just the um, dill pickles, fried dill pickles, and fried cheese, and whatever. It's all that kind of stuff,
Sauerkraut balls.
and that's where I was going to go. Yep.
Uh-uh.
So the fact. Go ahead. Tell the story about we're trying to source and create from scratch the sauerkraut balls, and what did we find?
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking, but I mean, so, we can produce our own sausage, we can make our own sauerkraut. Probably couldn't make cream cheese, but pretty much everything else we could probably throw together. But I thought it was interesting when we were at the store picking up the couple of items that we don't already have. We looked over and saw frozen sauerkraut balls in a bag. That was like $16, and that was crazy. That's a lot of money for an
Yeah.
appetizer.
Yeah, and instead tomorrow we'll get to enjoy. Hopefully, some of the kids join in, right? And we'll have some family time making the sauerkraut balls, and I'll bet you they taste better.
Oh,
Even if they don't,
definitely.
they will taste better because we made them ourselves. But
Yeah.
but what I mean by the idea of the hyperlocal source and some things we can't source, well, maybe you're not ready to make your own sauerkraut balls. They're in a bag. That's okay. But where's your source? The grocery store. Where do you shop? That way you have all of that listed, so you have a clear view as to where all of your ingredients are going to come from. All right. And then the last piece of this portion of the module of pillar one of the Grow Model Food System is calendar and scheduling, and that's where we take all that information that we've gathered and put together, and we start to lay out by season what it is. Week one, day one of season one, week one, day two of season one, and so on and so forth, so that we can lay that out. And that will inform our grow models that we're going to talk about later in future episodes. But that will inform our grow models so that we know what it is that we're taking on, what it is that we are going to hyper local source, or and when we need to get those things started, and if there's season extenders and that sort of thing. So I share all that to say that's a lot, and that's just in the planning. Again, we haven't even got into the gardening. So the slow is fast and fast is slow. We don't want to get discouraged. I don't want to get discouraged. So we're going to take it slow and always move in the right direction and build momentum. So if you want to get started today, before the course even comes out, start listing what is it that you actually are eating. And you got 30 days. You can do that. And 30 days of capturing what you eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner. What are your sides? What's your main course? What are your beverages? What are your desserts? What are your snacks? Don't forget snacks. So capture all of that information so that you have an idea as to what goes into your menu plan. And then on the menu plan side, just start thinking about, maybe start experimenting with whole foods, or things that you don't currently eat today that you might want to try. I know some of the members of the community, and I think maybe listening even right now, they raise quail. So maybe you're interested in raising quail. Go buy some quail and give it a shot. Maybe you'll find that that's your thing, and you actually enjoy quail, and your family enjoys quail. So that um, rather than investing in a whole quail setup, go try it, find some recipes, and and see what you like. Okay, that's all I had on that. Maria, did you have any closing thoughts on the slow is fast, fast is slow?
Um, Not on that particularly, but kind of, you know, in line with what you were talking about, writing down what you eat. And I started to think about the fact that here we are on New Year's Eve, and thought it might be a fun community conversation where we can talk about what our goals are, what our New Year's resolutions are, as far as homesteading and producing our own foods. And if it's just I want to be able to produce. I think you had a survey about this, right? Um, how many meals ultimately you would like to be uh, raising on your own, but come up with a goal by the end of 2023. I'd like to be able to be producing all of my own food, 50% of my own food, and just, kind of set some goals for 2023.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Were you suggesting just folks do that on their own? I was reading some comments, and sorry, I was multitasking. I missed the first part.
Well, I'm
Or are you
not sure
suggesting
what
we
the
do that now?
best. No, I mean, we certainly could do that now. Or maybe people need some time to think about, um, what their goals are for going into the new year. So I don't know what the best avenue is for that conversation, whether that happens in the community. Maybe you start a thread and we can all comment with what we would like to be doing this year.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll do that in the community. So, if you're listening and you have not heard me say this, the first 100 members of the community will be considered founding members. And while there isn't a whole lot of content there yet, we're working on it. Part of that content is the course for the Grow Model Food System, and the cohorts that will go through the course materials together. Um, and if you're one of the first 100, then you have a lifetime membership. And the whole idea here is honestly, I don't know if we might even go beyond the 100 for free. The whole idea here is to get as many people on the planet growing, raising, and sourcing their own food so that food is never an issue. Um, and if it is an issue, it's uh, because you choose for it to be, I guess. But that you we're all able to and knowledgeable enough about planning and executing the growing and raising of food for ourselves, for our family, and for others, right? It shouldn't just be about us. We should always probably be growing, I don't know, 25% more. And there are places, there are soup kitchens and things around the world that will you can sign up for and say, hey, I have extra produce and I want to share it. So uh, if you don't have people in mind that you know of, or your church doesn't have someone in mind, then there are plenty of places that'll take the food. But yeah, we'll post that in the community, and love to see what the feedback is. So go to community.homesteadgrown.org. You'll sign up, and when you sign up, then I'll get an alert, and then I'll send you a direct message that gives you a link to the plan that opens up all of the features for now and forever into the community. And there you go. Okay. So along those lines, um, I want to start the first cohort February 1st, or the first February 6th. So that Monday, February 6th, I'd like to start the first cohort. But here's the way this will go. I'm working on materials now and between now and then, and I'm sure that the first time we introduce these, you're going to have some very good feedback because what makes sense to me, because it's in my head, may not make sense to you because it's not in your head yet. And um, you will help me to be able to refine those materials for future consumers of those materials so that it makes more sense. And whether that's adding something or taking stuff away, because I could get long-winded and I can think it's an important detail and drill down into it. And you can say, no, that's an easy thing and you just need to gloss over that and spend more time over here. So it's that sort of thing that we're going to do. This is more of a, it's not a polished final course yet, and it won't be probably, well, maybe never. It'll always be improving as we go along with each cohort and each person who takes the course. But if you're willing to provide that feedback, then I'm willing to share what that vision is, and hopefully you'll catch that vision and you'll help build it and share it with others. And so again, the whole idea here is for as many people as possible to become more self-sufficient. At the same time, there's fellowship and there's camaraderie and there's support that hopefully will take place in the community, and those are all good things as well. So not just the materials themselves, but the friendships that can be formed and the support that can be had. On that line, we had two folks since last time join, and I welcome them. I'm kind of leery about saying people's names on the air, first names and last names. Who knows? I just, for whatever reason, I probably won't share names unless you specifically tell me it's okay. But welcome to the new folks. I'm glad you're there. Don't be shy. Jump in, and again, we're early, so if there's something that you're good at or interested in, share it. Chances are in the group like this, there are many others that are interested in the same thing. So again, I pointed out quail. I find that fascinating, and I'm sure others do as well. And so if you're interested in that or getting started, then there's some resources in the group that can probably help you, point you in the right direction, or can help mentor. So February 6th, share. Let other people know if they're interested at all. They need to be patient, but share. We're going to get started with that first cohort. The community, again, first 100 is free. I don't know if I have anything else to say about the community. Maria, is there anything that you think that I'm missing there?
Nope, I think you've covered it.
Okay, well, yeah, just as I said that, Maria, when I was trying to turn it over to you, I thought there are a few of the templates that I'll start posting just in the normal feed of the community. So you're welcome to take those templates and start doing whatever you want with them. Even start to critique them based on your knowledge of what I've shared before. And some of you who were around a couple years ago already kind of have the spirit of it. So you'll see that. Let me know if you have any feedback on the forms. The forms, I don't want things to be in a database for a number of reasons. One, I'm become very leery of databases, but mostly I don't want us to become dependent on electronics. So electronics are nice. They can be convenient, but I don't want to be tied to an electronic device in order for me to execute. So what these are is they're PDFs, and then what's called fillable PDFs. So if you save them to your local drive, you can enter data into the PDF, and you can save the PDF as many different versions so that you can have type text, because if you have handwriting like mine, you won't know what you wrote last week. So you're better off being able to type. And if you lost the internet, they're not cloud driven. So if you didn't have internet access, or you didn't want to have internet access for whatever reason, then you could still use those on your local computer, and you could save them and save as many versions of them as you'd like. So if you did a food journal for day 1 and day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, you would just save it as a new file each time as you filled it out. But I'll start posting those to the stream, the activity stream in the normal community. If you look at the left-hand column of the community, below the community feed, there are drop downs for the Grow Model Food System. And as I'm laying out the outline for those modules and sections, you'll see them. You'll start to see them start to become populated with various things. Feel free to check that out whenever you'd like.
Sorry about that. That was
I don't.
Toby.
Okay, I was just say I didn't know what that was.
Sorry.
It's okay. So anyway, that's the navigation on the left hand side. Is you can kind of drill in a little bit and start to see where the outline is going. And as I am preparing materials and putting them out there, you can test drive them. And again, feel free to give free feedback even prior to February 6th. That's all I have. I thank you all for joining this evening, and I thank you for your continued support. And I would just say to everyone, um, it's good to be prepared physically to be able to provide for food and sustenance, but it's also good to prepare spiritually. And while this isn't necessarily intended to be a spiritual show, I won't shy away from it. And I do think that prayer now is almost as important. Probably, well, not almost. It's more important now than any of this stuff that we're talking about as far as preparations for self-sufficiency in food. So. Prayer and more prayer for each of us as individuals, for our country, for the world, and for everyone, really. So anyway, thank you for joining. Have a great and safe and happy New Year, and we will see you next Friday.
Good night, everybody.